Good afternoon, guys. How are you? How is it going for everybody today? I know you guys are already having a wonderful day thus far. I am really excited about today and what we're going to be discussing, since we are seeing people are coming in and getting on board. I thank you guys so much for coming in and joining me on these Wednesdays, these Wednesday afternoons, to talk about surviving the process. And I am just really excited about what God is doing in this time, and I so appreciate the time that God gives me to be able to come and talk to you guys about surviving process and about just in general what process means, how you go through it, and how you actually can survive your process. Process, as I always teach, is not a problem, but it is a solution, and it is a tool that God uses to help us to walk to and to walk out our purpose. And so process is necessary, process is important, process certainly can be challenging, but if we don't resist it and we just embrace all of the lessons that it teaches us, then we can walk through our purpose confidently, we can walk through our purpose boldly, we can walk through our purpose with understanding and clarity. And so today we are going to talk about surviving the process, but we're going to talk about managing our emotions. And this is something that I'm going to be talking about with you all over the next week or two. I believe that managing your emotions, especially in process, becomes really, really important, especially when there are critical points that you hit within your process. How you manage your emotions and how you work through them become very, very important. And I say that because in managing your emotions or in dealing with your emotions, it becomes important. Why? Because our emotions dictate a lot about what we do. Our emotions dictate our perception. Our emotions dictate our responses. Our emotions dictate our reactions. Our emotions can, if we are not very careful, can dictate to us how we operate within our process. And so because within process you need to be clear in your thinking, you need to be clear in your understanding, and you need to be open to how God wants to move and how He wants to lead and direct you, managing your emotions become very important. Managing your emotions, I want to say, is not denying them. Managing your emotions is not acting as if they do not exist. Managing your emotions does not mean that you place them to the side, but managing your emotions means that you no longer allow them to be your master. Sometimes what happens with us is that we allow, or we find ourselves, because we don't properly manage our emotions, we find ourselves serving our emotions. And what we want to do is we don't want to serve our emotions. We don't want to allow our emotions to become our master. But what we want to do is we want to master our emotions. We want to manage them. We want to put them in their proper place, or put them in put our emotions in its proper perspective. And even in putting your emotions in proper perspective, it does not mean that you don't feel them. It just means that what you do is you examine now how you are going to operate within them. How am I going to respond? How am I going to react? How am I going to perceive? How do I make my perception clear within this moment of whatever it is that I'm feeling? And so in order to survive your process, you have to manage your emotions, and you have to do it properly. And in order to do that, the very first thing you need to do is you need to acknowledge what you're feeling. You need to acknowledge right in that moment, whether it be anger, whether it be fear, whether it be rejection, whether it be sorrow, whatever that is, you need to acknowledge it right in that moment. Sometimes what we do is we attempt to move beyond the situation, or we call ourselves moving beyond the situation because we attempt to move beyond our emotions. We attempt not to feel it. We attempt not to acknowledge it. We attempt not to act as if it didn't bother us, that it didn't mean anything. And in most instances, whatever you're feeling, or whatever it is you're attempting not to feel, it's bothering you. Because if that's your response, to attempt not to feel it, then it's bothering you. If it's your attempt not to acknowledge it, then it's an issue. If there's an attempt to try to skirt past it, then there's an issue. And so if you're going to survive your process, the very first thing that you need to do is that you need to acknowledge the emotion, acknowledge whatever that is that you're feeling. I know for me that acknowledging my feelings and acknowledging how I would, what I did and didn't like, was challenging for me. It was challenging because of how I learned how to deal with my emotions and how I attempted to deal with them. As some of you know, part of my story is that from, as a young girl, I was molested at a very young age. And in order to cope with that, I learned how to suppress my feelings. I learned how to suppress my emotions. And so what I would do is I would withdraw. I could be very much engaged with people and being around people and all of that. When I say withdraw, I don't mean that I would come from among people, but I was not emotionally present. Let me just say it that way. And I had learned how not to be emotionally present. And it was because of my background and because of some of the things that I had to deal with. And so I learned how not to be how to not be emotionally present. And so in learning how to do that, that's how I learned how to operate. That's what I would do. And so if you're going to, in order to get through that, I had to learn how to say what I felt. And it took a long time for me to get there because, again, because of my background, because of how I would suppress my feelings or how I would suppress my emotions. I always had this thing about not hurting the other person's feelings or considering them. And it had gotten to the degree where that thing just got so lopsided that I just stopped thinking about myself. And so whatever I felt about what you did, whatever I felt about what you thought, whatever I felt about what you were thinking about me in any regard became more important than what I felt about myself. And so in that regard, I had to learn how to manage my emotions from the perspective of how people felt about me and what they thought about me. I would entertain too much and for too long their opinions. I'd entertain for too long and too much. I would just internalize it so much that, that I became this person where I operated based on how other people said that I was and not who I really knew myself to be. And so I had to learn how to manage my emotions from the perspective of other people's opinions. I had to learn how to manage my emotions from the perspective of learning how to understand that in doing that, in managing my emotions, that I could value myself and still honor God at the same time. Because one of the other things that developed in me was a really deep-seated anger. I became very, very angry, not only because of just past experiences, but because I became just so frustrated in trying to be this great people pleaser. And so it just stirred up a whole lot of different emotions for me. It stirred up resentment, it stirred up anger, it stirred up bitterness. And if I was really going to be able to survive the process that God was going to take me through, which I didn't know He was going to do, but if I was really going to survive it, and if I was going to really live and live well, and if I was going to do the things that God really wanted me to do, then I was going to have to learn how to acknowledge those things. I was going to have to learn how to come to a point where I could acknowledge that I was angry, that I could acknowledge that about some things I was resentful, that some things that I was very bitter about. And again, acknowledging emotions does not make you weak. Doesn't mean that you're weak. It means that you understand that in the moment, this is where I am, that in the moment, this is how I feel, and I need to deal with this. I need to deal with it. I need to deal with what I'm feeling. I need to make sure that my responses and my thoughts are appropriate. Because as I said earlier, sometimes when we don't properly manage our emotions, we can do and say things that are that make the situation worse than what it needs to be, right? Because as I said earlier, managing your emotions is not denying them. Managing your emotions is not acting as if they do not exist. Managing your emotions is not attempting to get beyond what you feel. But managing your emotions is not allowing them to become your master. And for some of us, our emotions have become our master. Our pain has become our master. Our anger has become our master. Our resentment has become our master. And everything we do and how we operate from that understanding. We operate from that emotion. And so while we think that we are in control and while we think that we are managing something, in actuality, we're being managed. And so you don't want to be managed by your emotions, but you want to master them and allow your emotions to serve you, not you serve them. And so that is what happens when we stay in pain too long. When we stay in pain too long, pain has now become our master. When we stay in regret too long, hey Leslie, how are you? When we stay in regret too long, we're serving regret. When we stay in disappointment and discouragement too long, now it's become our master. And so what you want to learn how to do exactly, Leslie, is that you want to allow your emotions to serve you, not you serve them. Not you serve them. And I know for a long time, again, because of my background and because of experiences and things that have happened to me, I became a servant of pain. I became a servant of regret. I became a servant of disappointment. I became a servant to brokenness, even in brokenness, and we all go through things. We all do. We come to a place where we just, sometimes there's experiences that break us. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to serve our brokenness. Healing, and that's why healing becomes so very important. And that's why submitting yourself to the emotions from the perspective of acknowledging it and feeling it in the moment, because that's the beginning step of how you begin to heal. That's the beginning step in how you begin to move forward. And that's how you reverse the course. That's how you reverse the authority. That's how you reverse who's in charge, I'll say. That is the place where you begin to allow now your emotions to serve you and you not serve them. And I found this to be so important. And when the Lord said it to me, when He shared with me how I was serving my emotions, I really didn't get it, because I said, but God, but you're my Lord. You're my master. He said, no, I'm your Lord, but you have allowed your emotions and your situations to be your master. You've allowed it to be your master. And so even though you will praise me and even though you will seek me, you still will allow your emotions to master how you operate, to master how you function, to master how you think, to master your perceptions. And that's how that even in that's how the struggle comes in the word, because while, the Lord is saying one thing, my master is saying something else. And so there it comes in the conflict. And so in critical points and at critical times, I find myself struggling with who I'm going to serve. Am I going to serve the Lord or am I going to serve the master? Who am I going to serve? And so, what you want to do is you want to decide today, number one, that I'm going to acknowledge what I feel, that I'm going to reverse the course, and I'm going to reverse the authority. I'm going to reverse who I'm serving. I'm going to love the Lord, I'm going to acknowledge the Lord, and I'm going to serve the Lord too. And the things that come that will attempt to disturb my emotions or take my emotions to a different place or take my emotions to a place that I don't understand or take my emotions to a place where I don't feel like I'm in control, those things now I will no longer serve, but I'm going to give them to God, and I'm going to allow him to help me to be able to be in control of them. I'm going to allow them to help me to be in control of them. And one of the things that I found out is that sometimes, as believers, we make it difficult for ourselves to control or manage our emotions, because God gives us the out. He gives us the opportunity to be able to put in perspective and manage our emotions, right? So he says that, first of all, he gives us the permission to do it, because he says that we should guard our hearts with all diligence, because out of it comes the issues of life, right? And so that's the first thing he does, is he gives you permission to guard your heart. So now the things that enter in that disturb your peace, that disturb your comfort, that disturb your joy, God gives you the permission to protect your heart so that those things don't enter in and disturb how you really want to operate. Most of us want to operate in peace and comfort and joy. We don't want a whole lot of messiness. We don't want a whole lot of, just foolish things going on around us. And so as opposed to taking what God gives us, which is the permission to guard our hearts, we don't do that. And he gives us the permission to do it. He gives you the permission to value you. So when he's telling you to guard your heart, in essence, he's telling you, listen, value you. Value you. Value what enters into your space. Value what enters into your heart. Value what enters into your ears. Value what enters or attempts to enter into your mind to attempt to alter what I'm saying about who you are, to attempt to alter what I'm saying about where I'm going to take you and what I'm going to do in your life, right? So he gives us the permission. Then he also gives us permission to be angry, because he says, be angry and sin not. He never said don't be angry. Emotions, God has given us emotions because that's the natural side of who we are. But to balance out the natural side of who we are, or actually to govern the natural side of who we are, is the spiritual side of who we are. And so it's not that God doesn't want us to cry. He doesn't want us to be angry. He doesn't want us to feel mad. He doesn't want us to feel sad. We shouldn't feel all of these different things. He says that I just want you to be in control of it. The fruit of the Spirit is what? Self-control, right? And again, self-control is not that I don't feel anything. Managing emotions is not that I don't feel it, and it's not that. But managing emotions is not allowing them to dictate how I operate. And emotions do that. They can tend to manage or let me say, lead you in a way that you don't really want to go sometimes. You just don't want to go. I've heard people say, don't take me there. Well, don't tell nobody not to take you there. Just decide you're not going. Just decide you're not going to go. We say things all the time. Don't take me there. Well, no, they're not going to take you there. Just say, I'm not going to go. And there are some choices that I made when it comes to managing my emotions. They're just choices that I made. I just made the choice that I won't entertain, that I won't allow certain things to enter into my space, that I won't allow certain conversations to come, certain people. Just Make a decision sometimes. Sometimes in managing our emotions, it's about just making a decision. It's just making a decision. And so the first thing I want you to do, the first thing I want you to think about is that, number one, I'm going to acknowledge where I am. I'm going to acknowledge how I feel about that thing. I'm going to acknowledge it. And I'm going to feel it. And it's okay to feel it. Sometimes, that's another reason why we get into trouble, because we don't want to feel things. And you find yourself skirting around. You find yourself trying to do all of these things to avoid feeling. But you can't avoid feeling, because that's a part of who you are. God gave you emotions. That's why you feel things. That's why if you stub your toe, you say, ouch. That's why if if somebody says something funny, you laugh. That's why if a loved one dies, you cry. Because that's a part of who we are. So you can't avoid feeling anything. That's the whole point. You have to feel it. But what you don't have to do is to allow your feelings to take you to a place that now puts you off course with God, that will cloud your clarity, that clouds your perception, that clouds your understanding of how you need to operate. Because at the end of the day, you want to be good. You want to be all right. You don't want to be, all caught up in your feelings. Let's say that, right? All in your feelings. Sometimes we just get too deep in our feelings because we stay there too long. We entertain things for too long. We analyze things for too long. We go back and forth about stuff for too long. And some things you just need to let go. And so, number one, what we're doing to manage our emotions, we're going to acknowledge them. We're going to acknowledge how they feel. We're going to acknowledge that they're present. And we're going to be present in the moment. Detaching yourself from your feelings is just not where you want to be. And I know that there are circumstances and situations that will cause us to do that. Especially for people, if you are struggling with rejection, detaching yourself from the way you feel definitely is, it's almost becomes a survival skill. Right? Because you just don't want to be rejected. You don't want to tell anybody how you feel. You don't want to acknowledge how you feel because you just don't want to be rejected. But the deeper issue becomes how you, not the fact that you don't want to be rejected, which is an issue, but the deeper issue becomes why. What is that? Because if I can deal with the thing that initially caused rejection from me, then rejection now becomes less of an issue for me. And I think that in managing our emotions, and that's why I say acknowledge them, is because we don't acknowledge the situation that caused the emotion. We don't acknowledge the experience. We don't acknowledge whatever that is. And when we can get to the root of a thing, which in most instances is why we are so challenged to move beyond and to really move forward in our healing, in our journey of healing, is because we never get to the root of the issue. For me, I know that for me, in dealing with anger issues and having problems in my relationships and struggling to really love and receive love from an honest place, I always like to say, was really rooted in the fact of my being molested, because that changed how I felt about everything. It changed my perception of relationship. It changed my perception of intimacy. In actuality, it gave me a perverted perception. It gave me a perverted perception of intimacy. It gave me a perverted perception of relationship. It gave me a perverted perception of love and what that meant, and what it meant to be close to someone, what it meant to be in relationship with people. And so for a long time, that's how I operated. I operated out of that perverted thinking. And so, of course, it wasn't until the Lord actually could come in and I opened my heart to him and he could come in and he could reverse that for me. And it was through his relationship, that my relationship with him, that he taught me intimacy, and he taught me how to understand love, and he taught me how to be open to it, and he taught me how to discern what really was love and what really wasn't, and who was for me and who was not. That I was able now to come to the place where I am right now, and I can be very open. I can say what I feel. I can say it and not feel guilty about it. I can say it in a nice way, because I wasn't able always to do that. My tongue could be very sharp, And so I've learned how to do that. And so in managing your emotions, get to the root of the thing. Get to the root of it. Because there are behaviors that you're exhibiting because you haven't gotten to the root of the thing. And that's why you really can't manage your emotions. And that's why you choose not to feel them. That's why you choose not to acknowledge them. That's why you choose to overlook them. That's why you'll say things like, that doesn't bother me. They'll say things like, that didn't really hurt me, or I'm over it, all of that. Okay. Actually, you're not. Get to the root of it. When you get to the root of it and you decide that, you know what, this is really where this stemmed from. This is really where this started for me. And all of the other stuff that you see me acting out on the outside is really nothing. It's really just a distraction. I like to get to why people do what they do. If we can get to the why you do what you do, then all the other things will drop off. They will. They'll drop off. You'll operate different. You'll respond different. Your perception will be different. And so in managing our emotions, number one, let's acknowledge how we feel. Let's acknowledge let's acknowledge what has happened. And sometimes in acknowledging doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go to 5 people and say, this is what happened to me. Sometimes just acknowledging it is just going to God and saying, God, this is what this is. This is how I feel about this. This is what happened. This is where it all started for me. How do I change this? Help me to change this. Help me to make this better, because I don't like it. I don't like it. And you have to get to a point, especially when it's something that's really challenging to manage, an emotion that's really challenging to manage. You have to, at some point in time, decide that you don't like it. And for me, I decided that I didn't like being angry. I didn't like using anger as a defense mechanism. I didn't like being this person who would be so mean and just would be so angry all the time, and who would just snap your head off all the time, and who would be ready to just tell you off at a drop of a hat. I didn't like being that person, because I knew that's not who I was. But I learned to be her. I learned to operate that way. And I just decided that I no longer wanted to operate like that. And so when managing your emotions in your acknowledgement, you decide that you don't want to operate like that anymore, because it's not who you are. I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and we were talking about, I said to her that, how we live a lot of times is how we've learned to be, not who we were created to be. And she was like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, listen, I know for me, I was a cusser, right? I did it well. But I learned how to cuss. I wasn't created to cuss, because the Bible says that our words are seasoned with salt, right? And that we are to, that it's supposed to bring grace to the hearers. Okay, well, cussing ain't going to bring no grace at all. There is no grace in cussing. And so I wasn't created to be a cusser. I just learned how to be a cusser. I learned how to do that. And so now when I come into Christ, I had to learn how to now cause my words to be seasoned with salt. And it wasn't just changing the words, but it was understanding the power of my words. It was understanding the authority of my words. It was understanding what my words would do. And so a lot of things that we do, we learn how to do them. We were not created. Some people say, well, that's just me. I don't know. No, being a cusser was not just me. That's what I learned how to do. That was kind of like in my family line. We could do it. We could put them things together, and we can make a sentence out of some cusses. But that's not how I was created. I wasn't created to cuss. I wasn't created to tell you off. I wasn't created to, make you feel low or I wasn't created for that. I learned how to do that. And so some things in some instances in managing our emotions, you have to undo what you've learned. You have to undo how you've learned how to operate. You have to undo how you've learned how to function and how to respond. You got to learn how to undo it. How do I undo it? First of all, I acknowledge, God, this is where I'm at. This is where this is. I acknowledge it. I say that this is what it is, God, that this is what I'm feeling. This is what I don't like. This is what sets me off. Get to the triggers. Sometimes you got to get to your triggers too. You got to get to what that is, because once you acknowledge the thing, now that's when you start to do the work. And then part of doing the work is now getting to the triggers. What is it? It's still, you got to get to the root, because you know what? If you get to the root of the thing, you'll get to the triggers too. Because I know for me, and I'm going to take it back, and I'm always going to keep it to me, is that in dealing with being sexually violated, that there are certain things that would trigger memories. There were certain things that would trigger a thought. There are certain things that would trigger a response from me. And as opposed to my acknowledging that, what I would do is, again, as opposed to managing my emotions and attempting to acknowledge that, that when that happens, this is how I respond, and I respond because, I would try to skirt it. And I believe that a lot of you do that, as opposed to acknowledging the thing that's triggering what you're doing, because something is triggering it. Like, you just didn't wake up one day and just decide that you was going to be mean and nasty. You just didn't decide one day, just wake up in the morning and decide that, you know what, I'm not going to be loving, I'm not going to be kind, I'm just going to be this broken. You didn't do that. What's triggering it? What triggers your responses? What triggers your perceptions? What triggers your reactions? What triggers it? And when you can deal with the root and then deal with the triggers, healing is coming. Healing is inevitable. It is inevitable, because now, again, as I talked about earlier, you reverse the course. You reverse the course of what has the authority over you. You reverse the course of who and what you're going to serve. And the whole point of managing our emotions within our process, especially because process becomes challenging at times. There are critical points that come within our process, and we have to be able to manage our emotions. And again, managing your emotions is not feeling them, but you have to be able to manage your emotions. And so you got to be able to decide that, right there, that triggers that. That triggers this response for me, and this triggers that, and this triggers that, and this causes me to feel this way, and this causes me to want to withdraw. This causes me to not want to be, you fill in the blank. So if we're going to manage our emotions, we've got to acknowledge them. We have to feel them. And then we have to make a decision that we will no longer serve them. So that's our 3 things today. We're going to acknowledge them. We're going to decide that we're no longer going to serve them. And we're going to feel it. We're going to feel it. Let's just now for this, for the rest of the time, and, and a lot of people will get this during the replays, that I just want you to do those 3 things. I want you to think about in managing my emotions, and if I'm going to survive my process, that number 1, I'm going to acknowledge what I feel. Number 2, I'm going to feel it. And then number 3, I'm going to decide that I'm no longer going to serve it. I'm going to acknowledge it. I'm going to feel it. And I'm going to decide that I'm no longer going to serve it. Because in acknowledging it, you say it's present. In feeling it, you make yourself present. Because sometimes we can be in situations and we're just not emotionally present. And you need to learn how to be emotionally present. That's why I say feel it, because you need to learn how to be emotionally present. A lot of you are not emotionally present. You're there in a relationship. You're there in your business relationships. You're there in ministry. You're there in all of these you're there in your friendships, but you are not emotionally present sometimes. And you're not emotionally present because you don't want to feel it, whatever that is. And you know what it is. And so what we want to do in managing our emotions during our process, we want to acknowledge them. We want to feel them. And then we want to decide that we are no longer going to serve them. And over the next week or 2, however long the Lord decides that he wants, me to really delve into this about managing our emotions, these are the things that we're going to work on. We are going to work on. We're going to work on acknowledgement. We're going to work on feeling. And we're going to work on reversing the course. Reversing the course. And when I say reversing the course, what I mean is that we no longer serve our emotions, but our emotions serve us. They do our bidding. We no longer do the bidding of our emotions. I hope this helped you all today. This was really good for me. And I really hope that it helped you. I hope that it gave you some understanding about your emotions, where you are when it comes to your emotions, how you deal with your emotions, what you deny, what you skirt around, what you acknowledge, what you're not willing to acknowledge, how your emotions have dictated your perceptions and your responses and your reactions, and how, my prayer today is that you'll make the decision that I'm going to do something different, that I am no longer going to serve my emotions, but my emotions are going to serve me, that I'm going to put things in their proper perspective, that I'm going to allow God to be the Lord and the master of my emotions, and that I will no longer have him be Lord and let my emotions be master, but I'm going to cut off the authority of my emotions, and I'm going to allow God to be Lord and master of my emotions. I thank you guys so much for joining me today. Please like and share this video. There are people who are right now attempting to manage their emotions, and it is taking them into places that are very challenging. There are people who are attempting to managing their emotions right now, who have thoughts of suicide. There are people who are attempting to manage their emotions, who are thinking about just leaving it all and running away. There are people who are struggling so hard to manage their emotions, and they are, they're operating in this facade. If you saw them out, you'd never think anything was wrong with them. But in their quiet time, in their quiet place, they're struggling. They're struggling. And I believe that this message that the Lord has given me today is going to help them to no longer struggle with managing their emotions, but put them on a road to be able to begin to heal from whatever it is that's causing them to think out of order, feel out of order, operate out of order when it comes to their emotions. And so I thank you guys again so much for joining me. Again, please like and share this video. And next week we will be here again, and we're going to be talking about managing our emotions. We're going to be talking about how do we put our emotions in their proper perspective so that God is the Lord and master over our emotions. Michael says it's a beautiful thing when you learn what you can't hold. God is able to bring you out. That is the truth. Because for some of us, our emotions, there's a certain capacity, I guess, sometimes with our emotions. And when it gets beyond our capacity to control, when it gets beyond our capacity to manage, that's when we have to be able to reach out to the Lord and say, God, my emotions are way beyond where they need to be right now. I'm in my thought process and how I'm thinking and how I'm perceiving and how I want to respond and, what I want to do is way beyond what I'm able to control right now. And so that is course, and no longer serving our emotions, because that's what we do. And I tell you, I did not realize that that's what I was doing. I really thought that in everything, I really thought that I was doing pretty good. I thought I really was managing my emotions, but I didn't realize that really my emotions were managing me. They had me all over the place. They had entered into my thought process and had me doing and thinking things and saying things that were just totally ridiculous. And that's not God. That's not where God would have us to be. That's not operating in the fruit of the spirit of self-control. And again, self-control is not that is not that you don't, you're not exhibiting self-control because you don't feel what you feel. You don't exhibit self-control because you ignore it. You don't exhibit self-control because you just push it away. Exhibiting self-control is understanding who is in authority, which is the Lord, and allowing the Lord to teach you how to operate when your emotions get too high, when your emotions are beyond your capacity to even understand and to manage. I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. Thank you again so much for joining me. And I thank you, Leslie. It was so good to be able to interact with you and engage with you today. Thank you so much for joining me, and Danetta, and I saw Robert, and I saw Joyce, I think, and a couple other people today. And I thank you guys so much for taking the time to just spend some time with me and let's talk about and have this conversation about managing our emotions. You guys have a great rest of the day. I love you all so much. And I'll be talking to you soon. Have a good one, guys. Bye.